Hello fellow coffee botherers, in this video I'm introducing the top 10 tick list for dialing in espresso. If you're expecting a really long complex video, fear not, this is simple. I just wanted to create a quick simple tick list so that anyone struggling to get decent cup quality can go through the list and check all these important elements are ticked off. If you want more info on any of these points, by the way, click here or the link in the description for the Simplifying Espresso playlist, which is a video going into more depth on most of these points. Number 1. Buy the right beans. If you're looking at how to do a better job of dialing in to get better taste in espresso, it starts off with the beans. You need freshly roasted beans for dialing in. Supermarket beans with no roasted on date are fine if you enjoy that kind of coffee, but if you're trying to get great results, you need great coffee. This is why the instructions on Sage or Breville espresso machines and some other machine brands too state that you should use pressurised baskets if you're not buying freshly roasted beans. Also buy the right beans for your machine and your level of home barista experience. If you have an entry-level setup and you're fairly new to home espresso, keep in mind that espresso blends are much more forgiving. I get a lot of beginner home baristas contacting me having all kinds of trouble pulling shots, and most of the time they're buying medium roasted beans, and medium can cover a fairly broad spectrum, and some medium beans can be a challenge for entry-level setups and beginner home barista skills. So I'd recommend cutting your teeth, weird saying, on darker roasts. If you're a customer of seaworks.co.uk, my coffee, just click the very useful Sage coffee machines filter. All of the beans you'll see are fine for the more entry-level setups, and if you click the blends filter, they're the most forgiving beans to start out with. Number 2. Grind your own beans. If you're buying pre-ground coffee, you're very unlikely to be able to get the best from it. Some of these tips might help you slightly if you're using pre-ground, but for the best results you'll need an espresso-capable grinder. Number 3. Don't store beans in your hopper. This isn't only about not letting your beans go stale, that's important too obviously, but storing your beans in your hopper causes problems. The first problem is that hoppers aren't airtight. Even if you have a gasket on the lid, oxygen is smaller than ground coffee, so if coffee is coming out the bottom, oxygen can get into the hopper. Oxygen isn't the only problem, light and moisture are a problem too, as is consistently changing temperature and humidity, which makes hoppers a particularly poor place to store beans if you have an integrated grinder. Number 4. Extend the shot time window. One of the biggest issues I see is new home baristas aiming for a tiny window of 28 to 32 seconds or 25 to 30 seconds, and this shot time just isn't all that significant for most setups. It comes from professional barista training using precise gear that may produce really good results within that particular shot window and really under or over extracted shots outside of it, but most beginner baristas aren't using setups with this level of precision. Aim for a window of about 20 to 35 seconds, including pre-infusion time. Start your timer when you press the shot button and be led mainly by taste and not so much by the numbers. Don't overcomplicate things. Number 5. Understand what the taste of your espresso means and how to change it. Sourness points to under-extraction and bitterness points to over-extraction. You can balance a sour shot by working to extract more from the bean, and you can balance a bitter shot by working towards extracting less. But the way to do this isn't limited only to adjusting the grind size. If your machine gives you precise control over the brew temperature, you can also extract more by upping the brew temperature or extract less by dropping it. But as many entry-level machines don't give the option to change brew temperature, or to change it precisely at least, there's another way to balance bitterness and sourness, which leads us to number 6. Use ratio as a tool to balance the shot. One of the most overlooked dialing in variables, this is really helpful, especially if you have an espresso machine with fixed brew temperature. By keeping the dose weight the same and adjusting the yield, the amount of espresso, you tweak the ratio. A bigger ratio will increase the bitterness and a shorter ratio will decrease it. Over time, you'll learn to preempt what ratio might work best, depending on the beans you're using. If I'm using new beans and they're on the dark side, good. Thanks, Darth. I'll start out with the more traditional 1:2 ratio, 18 grams of beans to 36 grams of espresso, for example. If they're on the lighter side, I'll usually start out with a bigger ratio. This doesn't always work, but it's a helpful rule of thumb. Number 7, pull the shot manually. I hear from a lot of people who struggle because they use the pre-programmed shot buttons on their machine, which will just give you whatever volume the machine comes set to. Once you understand the importance of ratio, you'll understand why you shouldn't just let your machine dictate the shot volume. Instead, decide what ratio you're aiming for and then stop the shot when you get that ratio. You can either reset your shot buttons to this volume or just pull the shots manually or semi-manually, which is where you just set the shots to a higher volume than you'd usually need and just press the button to start and press it again to stop. Number 8. Understand dose volume. Most people just talk about dose, but there are two sides to dose: weight and volume. The dose weight means how much the coffee in the basket weighs. The dose volume means how much space it takes up in the basket. You can have the same dose weight but different dose volumes, simply because if you grind finer, you'll fit more in the basket. Dose volume is important mainly when it comes to headspace, the space between the puck of coffee and the shower screen. And the most important thing is not to overdose, which means to have too high a dose volume, as this can mess up your shot. Underdosing doesn't usually mess up the shot as such, but this will lead to a soggy puck, and no one likes a soggy puck. So just keep in mind that as you're adjusting the grind, the height of the coffee in the basket will be changing, which is the dose volume. This is why if you do have a Sage or Breville machine, I'd always recommend using the razor tool they come with, at least when you're getting started, because you'll have the ideal dose volume for every shot. Number 9. Warm up. Do star jumps and burpees before pulling shots. Just kidding, that would be ridiculous. But warm up your machine and your cup. Even if your machine has apparently reached temperature, all the gubbins inside will be cool at first, as will the portafilter and your cup or glass. So flush water through the group with the portafilter in place and the cup below, and get everything warmed up before you pull your shot. Number 10. The Purge. I'm not talking about the series of dystopian action horror films distributed by Universal Pictures and produced by Blumhouse Productions and Platinum Dunes, thanks Wikipedia. I am, of course, referring to the process of ditching old coffee from your grinder. Most grinders have what's referred to as exchanged retention, which means coffee retained inside the grinder which ends up in your next basket. It's important to purge a small amount of coffee after you've changed your grind size, or when coming back to your grinder after a few hours or the next morning, so that all the coffee in your basket is freshly ground and at the same grind size. And there you go. If you're having any problems dialing in espresso, go through this list and make sure you're doing all of these things. And hopefully you'll figure out what the issue was and you'll be making amazing espresso from now on. If any of these help, let me know in the comments below. NASA uses the Armageddon movie during astronaut training as an example of how to not do things in space. And that has nothing to do with clicking the like button, but click the like button if you've ever looked at the sky. Thank you very much for watching, and if you love coffee and enjoyed this video, we've got tons of content about how to make better coffee at home to take you from beginner to home barista. And we've got reviews and how-tos on the most popular machines. If you like the sound of that, click on my face to subscribe. Tatty Bye.